G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Craig Will from Stillwater and Black Cow Restaurants and Stillwater 7 Accommodation based in gorgeous Launceston, Tasmania, or a bit over 2 hours drive from where I'm based in Hobart here. Thanks for your time today, Craig.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. That's your older brother, Matthew, or Mauser, who was on cast number 3. I think we met maybe eight or so years ago.
Yeah, it would have been at his house, I reckon, like one of the barbecue soirees he puts on that we first met.
Yep. Yeah, he loves to cook.
Oh, don't he? Yeah, runs in the family.
Do you guys have a bit of a competitive nature in the kitchen? You being a full-time head chef?
Oh, not really. We sort of bounce ideas off each other and work in that kind of guys. So
great.
Definitely.
And so we had your business partner Rod Asquith on cast number 7 about 16 months ago now. So we've already covered the businesses a little bit, but today we are going to dive also into a few changes in the business, not just obviously making it through COVID with restaurants and accommodation, which will be interesting to hear, but also we want to talk a little bit about Rod and Kim exiting the business as owners and yourself and James and Bianca staying on. So that'd be great.
That's right. Yep.
So tell our audience a bit about your businesses there, what they do and how they make money.
So we've got 2 restaurants. Obviously, you've mentioned Black Cow, which is a boutique steakhouse in the CBD here in Launceston. It's a 45-seater, but we've got capabilities to do about 120 covers per evening. A little bit restricted nowadays with COVID. Our second restaurant, Stillwater, which is 21 years established, which I've been involved with for 11 years, is sort of the more niche market restaurant. So that's a bit more upscale from Black Cow. We can seat up to 65, 70 in a sitting, and we can turn that restaurant, 2.5 times in the real busy periods to get us up to, 120 sort of covers thereabouts. It's a bit of a different style. It started out as a fine dining restaurant. We've sort of dumbed it down a bit over the years to make it more conducive to a wider clientele and grown the business in that respect. And above Stillwater sits what was now Stillwater 7, which is 7 boutique accommodation rooms in Launceston. And that's just added to our business. That's 2 years old now. And it's a different sort of approach to what we do in that respect. So.
And Stillwater, you're obviously different to Black Cow in that you do breakfast at Stillwater and lunches 7 days a week. The accommodation, they're actually housed in, what are they, old grain silos?
Well, the grain silos sit alongside the building. Where the accommodation sits is directly above the restaurant, which is the old mill. I suppose that's where it housed all the equipment to mill flour.
Got it.
And before we put the accommodation in place, we had what was called the Stillwater Providore. We had for about 4 years, I suppose. We bought that business. It was already established. We thought we'd get into the retail space and become owners of the entire building space, so to speak. It didn't really hit all the targets that we sort of had in place. And there was a gap in the market for boutique accommodation in Launceston. And that was sort of the brainchild of Rod and Kim to put that in place and for us to run it as a business. So they put in all the infrastructure. He's the landlord. So he put in all that that we could then run as a business together.
Yeah, I've seen the Stillwater 7 rooms. They're beautiful. They look up the Tamar there, the river in Launceston. And it was Cumulus Studios that designed the rooms, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah, they designed the rooms and I think they've done a fantastic job.
Yeah,
they're kicking all sorts of goals and winning national awards, and we've got a customer pool of mainly mainlanders, but we do get a lot of interstate travellers coming up wanting to spoil themselves and stay the night.
Yeah.
And sort of COVID came, I suppose, and sort of put a stop to our international market. But it's still going strong today, just with the local market. So
that's great. And what, for the audience's context, what kind of room rate per night?
So we're sort of averaging around the $550, $600 a night room rate.
Yep.
And that obviously comes with a few inclusions there. We include breakfast with that, and welcome drinks and snacks, and provide, bread and that kind of thing in the afternoon that people can eat before they can come down for dinner. Obviously, we want to try and capture them in the restaurants between Black Cow and Stillwater, and we do that quite well.
Yeah, good. And Cumulus Studio, who designed those rooms, I had Kylie on from Cumulus, episode 25. So they're a great architectural and design agency here in Tasmania.
That's right. And they've done plenty of projects around the state, and they've actually become quite a bit of a juggernaut now and in demand, and we're lucky to have them on board with this project.
Yeah, you look at something like Pump House Point, which is on Lake St. Clair in the middle of the lake. A lot of the rooms are. The design work they do there, plus Devil's Corner on the East Coast, the winery. Big fan of their work. Yeah,
that's great. And they've just recently finished the Cradle Mountain Visitor Centre too.
That's right, yeah. So tell the audience how you started out. We heard from Rod how how Stillwater started out, 35 so years ago now in the early 80s. But maybe tell the audience about how you got involved with both restaurants.
So Stillwater had been established for about 8 years at the time I came on board. Rod and his former business partner at that time had the opportunity to take over a space in the CBD, which is an old butcher's shop, which had been converted into a restaurant by another party. But it was sitting vacant, and he had the idea to turn it into a boutique steakhouse. He'd gone through a few of his former employees, namely chefs, because he wanted to get a chef business partner involved as well as someone front of house.
Very smart.
Yeah, who James and Bianca took that role. So he sort of called me out of the blue one day, just through the contact of my brother Mauser, and offered me this opportunity on the phone. So I came up the next week, had a look at the space, had a look at the pitch, and sort of went back and sort of thought about it for the next week, and thought to myself, well, this is an unreal opportunity to get involved with such good operators in this space. It'd be silly to turn it down, and I agreed to it. And that was in October, and we opened the restaurant in December of 2008.
2008. And so you hadn't met Rod at that point?
No, never. And I'd only ever dined at Stillwater once because I'd been working away. I was born and raised in Launceston and moved away and hadn't really spent much time here. So that was the first meeting that we had, and we got along really well. And I suppose, the rest is kind of history from that respect. We've had a great working relationship going forward. And a year after we started, Black Cow had the opportunity to buy out his former business partner in Stillwater. So James, Bianca and myself did that in 2010, took that over in April with Rod, and sort of bought more equity in the business over the coming years to make the split even across the three parties.
Just want to circle back. Holy shit, that's a pretty ballsy move by Rod. Firstly, he hadn't even met you. And secondly, I take it he hadn't even tasted the food that you cook either. So that's a lot of trust that he's got in, obviously, your brother Mauser, and I assume you would have checked with a few other people to make sure that, that you were solid.
Yeah, totally. And I suppose he knew Mauser for some years before that and kind of knew our family. And I suppose he took a punt, on me being like-minded like my brother. And I suppose it worked out well for him.
And in 2008, when you started in there, how old were you?
I was 25.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
And where were you based at the time? Because you had to move, didn't you, for this?
Yeah. So I was based in Hobart. I worked at a restaurant called Mark IV, which is no longer, but at the time was probably the pinnacle of dining in the state. Won numerous awards in the short time it had been there. Working under Chef Paul Foreman, I quickly got promoted to his second chef and was heavily involved with the menu design and the running of the restaurant itself. So I had my first house, which I sold back then to fund myself into Black Cow. And sort of took a gamble in that respect and moved back to Launceston. Had to convince my wife to come with me.
Yep.
Which was an easy one, I suppose, because it's such a great opportunity. And here we are now, and that was 2008, 13 years later.
Geez, mate, you hear so many horror stories of business partnerships go wrong. I'm still in awe that I thought Rod knew you before he made the offer on the phone, but that's phenomenal.
Yeah, no, didn't know him from bar of soap.
Do you have any key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business? I know Rod went through some in the last episode, but any numbers you can share with us, particularly, I guess, maybe around Stillwater 7?
So Stillwater 7, I suppose that was obviously a brand new business, brand new space for us. We'd never operated in the hotel business before this point. But I suppose we got the right people involved. We did bring on another business partner, Chris, who is running the hotel business for us. But we sort of went in with a, I suppose you could call a room rate, and sort of did our numbers from there. And the growth from there has probably gone up 25-30% since then. And obviously added to the restaurant business as well. We've seen growth in that space. Obviously being able to operate longer hours with the hotel in place. We sort of need to extend our trading hours. Back in the day, we used to sort of shut the place down over winter for a month, which we no longer do. We operate all year round now, and we've seen good growth in the restaurant trade as well.
And I assume then you track the guests that stay in the accommodation. You have a way of tracking those that then book at Stillwater and or Black Cow, so you can kind of see what kind of cross-selling you're getting or upselling. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, probably our biggest revenue stream from the rooms is definitely the extras, what we call extras. That's dining within the restaurants. That's in-room minibar dining. Obviously, those guests bring in local friends into the restaurant as well, so we can track that quite easily through our systems and find out where the money's coming from. So
yeah,
it's been a really good revenue raiser for the restaurant.
Well, it's great to hear you tracking numbers like that, because that is very smart. And maybe for the audience, just explain James and Bianca's role.
So James is the sommelier. He came on as the sort of front of house person for Black Cow. And also Bianca was working front of house at the time too. And those guys, they run the sort of wine program and the front of house side of the business. I run the back of house, which is like the kitchen side of it, which is about 50% of our employees. And then also Chris, who runs the hotel side of the business.
And both restaurants have won a shit ton of awards over the years, haven't they?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, our latest accolades would be the Age Good Food Guide, Chef's Hats, which has only sort of come to Tasmania in the last 4 years. We always kind of got excluded from that guide. So we're the only two places in the north that received a Chef's Hat, and we've maintained those up until now. The awards didn't happen last year, but they will be happening again this year. So that's our goal, to retain those 2 hats at both restaurants. And I think there's only about 5 hats that are dished out in Tasmania. So we've got almost half those, which is a great achievement.
Fantastic. Well done. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
And when was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
Succeeded, I suppose. You spoke about Rod and Kim exiting the business last year. I mean, Rod's always been a mentor to me, and he always will be. And we've had a great working relationship over the years. But with him sort of like exiting the business, it was a bit daunting at the time. And we've changed quite a few of our processes and accounting software and things like that. So it was sort of had to relearn from the ground up. But I suppose at that point, when Rod did exit the business and we had a bumper summer, I thought, well, this is the moment, where I've kind of made it.
Yep.
We self-funded the buyout ourselves. So I think, at that point, I thought this is real now. And I've definitely kicked my final goal in this business.
Great. And do you know what really turned Rod's mind to finally exiting? Because he'd been in the business for many, many decades.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like precursor was probably when you spoke to him on his episode. He was on the verge of shingles, and I think that was a bit of a wake-up call for him. He recovered and he got back to full health, and then coronavirus came, and I think it was just all the timing was right for him to sort of take a step back. He's
Yep.
got other business interests that will take up his time, and I think he just wants to see his legacy live on.
Yeah.
And he handed the keys to James, myself, and I think that it's in good stead, and it will go forward and grow from now. So
Great. I heard a story, another straw on the camel's back that help him make that decision. I don't know if it's true or not, but when I think your new accountant suggested you move to Xero, new accounting software, and Rod said, "I'm not going to learn a new piece of software, and I'm out."
yeah, that's pretty much was the precursor to everything happening. We sort of wanted to change systems, make our life a bit simpler. He'd been using MYOB for forever and a day, and he didn't want to learn a new system. And I think that was just, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. And what does success look like to you?
I suppose success to me looks like running a profitable business, obviously, and self-funding ourselves into new projects, having enough money in the bank to cover all our liabilities in case of disaster, like we were facing last year with coronavirus. We could pay all our debt, creditors and close the doors of the business and pay out all our staff and not be in debt. I suppose that's what success looks like to me.
Number one thing you'd recommend marketing a fast-growing business?
Well, I think because the space that we operate in now, like with social media and that kind of thing, like it's a simple tool to use, and it's very powerful with what you can do with it these days. Back in the day, you'd put ads on TV, radio, newsprint, that kind of thing. We've actually gone down the path of a new marketing manager, and we've taken a completely different angle in the way we market ourselves. So we're getting national press now that we never used to. We used to sort of focus on the sort of international market that were coming here, and they were a big part of our business. But with the closure of the borders, we've had to rethink how we're doing that. And social media is a huge one. Instagram especially is a powerful tool that we use.
And funding the business over the years, you obviously sold your house to be able to buy in equity-wise, but funding the business growth, have you guys had to take on bank finance or land any grants from the government or take on any other investors? So
the way we funded into Stillwater was a vendor finance arrangement.
Yeah,
with Rod himself. So we, strive to pay that debt down as quickly as possible, and we did that in a 2-year period.
Wow.
And so no sort of bank loans. I mean, it's a tricky business to get a bank to lend you money because it's based on goodwill. It's not very tangible, to be able to lend money against unless you've got property and things like that. I mean, we did buy the Black Cow building back in 2010 when we sort of got into the Stillwater business as well. So we became our own landlords, and that was a solid investment too. It's grown over the years that we've been able to use that as a revenue stream as well.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Look, I think I would. I mean, hospitality has been a big part of my life. I'd like to think that I'm good at it, and with a big pool of money, I suppose you can just upscale what we're doing. There's definitely holes in the market up here too that we've identified and are working towards filling as well. So I think it's exciting times in Tasmania, especially with the fact that we're an island. We're safe from, somewhat safe from the virus, and there are a lot of people relocating back down to Tasmania to start a new life, and I think it's only going to get bigger. Yeah,
let's not let the secret out of the bag too much.
No.
A lot of people from Sydney and Melbourne are moving here, and even internationally. Yeah,
that's right.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Look, I think the most stressful part of the hospitality business is staff.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of what we do. It's a huge cost of what we do. Finding the right people down in a place like Tasmania can be tricky, but in saying that is also tricky in places like Melbourne and Sydney. So I sort of identified that from an early standpoint, and I decided to start growing my staff, as in bringing in young people, getting them on apprenticeships, giving them the right training, and keeping them on board going forward. Obviously, as a young person, you want to go off and do other things. And we've seen staff go and come back. And
Yep.
I've actually got one of my staff members who's been with me he worked at Stillwater before I got involved, and he's been here for 15 years now. He was an apprentice. I signed him off. He's now my head chef. So
Right.
the definitely been a stressful part of the business is maintaining the skill and the right staff base.
Yeah. Would you say your staff turnover, particularly in the kitchen or hospitality, I guess, is lower than industry average?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We're definitely in it for the long game. We want to invest in our staff for the long term, and turnover is reasonably low. I mean, front of house is a little bit different. We've only got, a few full-timers like managers and sommeliers and things like that, and the rest is sort of filled by part-timers, casuals, but turnover as a whole is quite low of staff.
Yep. I've obviously dined at both Stillwater and Black Cow a shit ton over the last 10, 11 years I've been in Tasmania, and I've noticed it, and people that I've dined with have commented on the service at both venues is superb and very consistent. Even, most of the time, you may not be in the kitchen or know that I'm there, or James or Bianca. So it's great that you guys have been able to train the entire team to have a real customer-centric focus and provide consistently good and positive service.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned that, we don't always have to be there, and we're less so these days because we've got to be working on the business as opposed as into it. But someone's texting me.
Sorry.
But we focus a lot on training. We do work within the business a lot today still. I mean, you've got to keep your finger on the pulse as well. You've got to relate to your staff, and you need to be there alongside them on a regular basis to sort of make sure that everything is running correctly, and stand shoulder to shoulder with them, and they see that, and they get more respect out of your staff that way.
Yeah. And what area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
I would say my people skills. Like I'm a bit of an introvert. I've had to work on that quite a bit over the years. Be more open and be out there in the public eye a bit more, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So I've sort of like been doing sort of like demonstrations. I've been doing cooking classes. I've been getting out in the wider business community, making myself known. That's been a big step for me to move down that path and sort of develop those skills.
What have you enjoyed least about managing the fast growth?
I suppose it does take a toll on your sort of personal and family life, especially in the hospitality business when you're working odd hours. And trying to keep that work-life balance has been a bit of a juggle, but I think I've managed it well so far. My wife was also in the hospitality industry when we met, so she does understand how it works, and is definitely a rock, my rock, I suppose, to keep me grounded and keep the family home fires burning, and so I can do what I do.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Look, I think growing a small business is just great for obviously expansion as well. I suppose we started with Black Cow. It was very small scale. It allowed us to buy into Stillwater and grow that business. It allowed us to get into the providor and go, look, this is not for us, so let's turn that around and get into the accommodation business. So I suppose that's exciting. That's what keeps us sort of like hungry, I suppose. Expanding on what we're doing would be the best part of that.
What's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Biggest mind shift, I suppose, is keeping an eye on your numbers. I suppose when you're working as a chef, just in the industry, you're sort of focused on one thing, and that's producing food and high quality food. But there's a massive cost associated with that. And I mean, I've always been interested in numbers and money and things like that from the get-go. So like I've always sort of focused on that. But I suppose it becomes a big part of what you do on a day-to-day basis, keeping an eye on cost and making sure that you're remaining profitable at the same time.
What is the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
probably touch on that again. You need to keep an eye on your costs, especially in the hospitality industry. It's just things can escalate within a day or two if you're not onto it. Like price of food fluctuates on a daily basis, and you need to keep a finger on the pulse and keep an eye on that every day of the week. Otherwise, you could soon see money flying out the back door that you didn't know was going. So that's the number one habit that I always get into, check the numbers every day.
Find it hard to define a clear strategy, then communicate it and execute it alongside the rest of your team? Or you currently don't work a simple quarterly strategic plan to boost your team's performance? Our Business Growth Formula online course is perfect for small business owners with 5 to 30 team members wanting to grow. We share the mindsets, habits and tools to be a legendary leader in your business. growasmallbusiness.com. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes and advice for those listening?
Some wins, I suppose, is maintaining that workplace culture, and that sort of comes back down to my shoulders. I suppose maintaining that morale has definitely been a definite good win for us. So I think that keeping everyone hungry as well. It can get a bit mundane going in doing the same thing day in, day out. I think, creating new projects, creating events throughout the year has definitely boosted what we're doing as a business and boosted our staff morale at the same time.
What about any mistakes the audience can learn from adding people to the team?
I suppose you got to get the right people. You've got to make sure that they are going to gel. There's plenty of instances where we've had disruptors in the staff that we've had to soon weed out, I suppose. But you just got to be careful about who you put on, make sure the personality is going to get along, and not go down that path of just filling the gaps with whoever you find. I'm very careful about what I do bring into the team. Yeah,
the warm body syndrome. You're under pressure to fill a role, and you rush it, and you pay for it later. You got a B or a C player on, or an arsehole, and they can be quite toxic.
Oh, totally, and it can ruin things in a matter of weeks. If you're not too careful. So I'm very cautious about what I put on. Probably in the last 2 years, I've put on maybe 2 full timers in that time, and maybe 2 apprentices in the last 2 years. So they've got to be the right people.
What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Well, keeping people motivated, doing staff events, making sure that the team bond. Obviously, being there yourself, working with them on a daily basis, like we're present every day, definitely builds that culture, and people can see that. They can see that we're working hard. We've got all the same common goal. We're not sitting directing all the time. So it definitely builds a good culture.
And those team events you mentioned, what are some examples that you guys do?
Well, we've got one coming up in 2 weeks. We will put a survey out to all our staff with a few different ideas as to what would be a good team bonding experience. And they've actually picked one called Paint and Sip, which is where you go and you get a canvas and you have an image that you copy from, pretty much that the host has on display. So paint and sip, obviously you take a bottle of wine, have a glass of wine, paint a canvas over the next couple of hours and have a bit of fun doing it. And I think that's just a great little tool to keep your staff sort of motivated and bonded. We had the option of doing bowling and paintballing and that kind of thing, but we'll do those again another day. But we try and do it regularly along with staff parties. So just keep it all.
That's good. Yeah, the paint and sip concept I've seen is really accelerated over the years. I saw it down here in Hobart and in Mac 1 there, just opposite Black-footed Pig. It's always packed, popular, a lot of laughter.
Yeah, totally, and it's a great experience, and I think it just goes to show that the majority pick this particular activity, and I think it's going to be great for them.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Balance as in work-life, or?
Yep, work-life, yeah.
I suppose just keeping work hours to a certain time frame. the ability to duck out and get the kids from school, and making sure that you have a weekend with them as well. I suppose just set those rules from an early standpoint, and try and stick to them as humanly possible. Also having procedures and policies in place. When you're running a business that operates 24/7, there's inevitably things that go wrong. And if something breaks or something needs fixing, then you have those contacts in place that staff can ring before ringing you. And get those people in to do those jobs.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself? Books, podcasts, courses, training, or conferences?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the local chapter of the Australian Culinary Federation, which is a nationwide organisation, and that focuses on professional development, as in talking to other sort of industry people. You do competitions, you get staff involved with competitions, you bring them into the fold. That's one thing that I do, but possibly the biggest thing that we do is keeping in contact with other industry colleagues, and that's done through social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, looking at what other people are doing around the state, around the country. Looking at food trends as well is a big one, because being stuck down here in Tasmania, you're sort of excluded from what the mainland are actually doing. Also, as bad as it sounds, going away to Melbourne, Sydney on food binge trips. We've done that. And it's shit life, but someone's got to do it. We usually take a few of our staff with us. Normally Melbourne. We did plan a Sydney trip. We'll probably do that in the coming months. But go see what other restaurants are doing, eat food, drink booze, and bring those ideas back and let them bubble away. And we've had great success from that.
Can you reel off a few Melbourne restaurants that are your favourites?
Definitely any of Andrew McConnell's restaurants, like Marion, or his new one, Gimlet, I really want to get to. I've had a few friends go there already. Cumulus Inc. it's called, is my go-to place over there.
Is that mainly for breakfast?
Yeah, it does breakfast and lunch and dinner, but it's more of a breakfast sort of but any of his sort of establishments are my go-to because they're just that good. So
yeah, great. And have you had any mentors or coaches along the way?
Look, I think my biggest mentor would definitely be Rod. He's been like a second dad, and we're going to have that relationship going forward. He's just a great business person and person in general.
He's a top bloke.
To bounce ideas off and to guide us through the last 10 years. And I think we've learned a great deal from him in business and obviously personally. But former sort of chefs that I've worked for have been mentors over the years. If you've got issues or problems, they always ring them up and bounce ideas off them, catch up regularly. But no sort of like professional mentor. But they're the ones I sort of go to from time to time.
And do you have a board of directors or advisors?
Look, we don't have any advisors. We're our own board. We run a company, obviously, and we're the board directors, which I chair. So we meet each month and obviously have an agenda that we work through and do it in that respect. So, yeah.
Great. Before we get on to the final 5 questions, we haven't had many on who have exited the business, and this is even further different in that one of the business partners has exited. Have you got any other comments you want to share with the audience on, Rod and Kim exiting the business over the last few years?
I mean, I suppose in the last few years, Rod and Kim have sort of scaled back a bit on what they did in the business. They sort of let us take over. Obviously, I think that's what their plan was initially anyway, was to get young blood in. So, they've got a succession plan to sort of exit the business. We sort of started taking over a lot of roles that sort of Rod did and obviously streamlined them, simplified them, that kind of thing. So I think by the time he sort of got to the end of his tenure, like he could leave in a good place, and everything was sort of running the way it should be. So,
anything you'd change on how Rod's transitional exit happened, or any advice for those thinking about doing something similar?
I mean, it was completely amicable. We sat down and had the conversation one day. What is your what is your plan going forward? You know, like I'm a big planner. I've had a plan since, you know, in an early age as to what I want to do and get out of life, and I've stuck to it. Not everyone's like that. Not everyone forward thinks like that as much as I do, but sort of sat down, just had that conversation, you know, what's happening in the next few years. Like happy to keep doing what we're doing, but we sort of need some sort of clarity as to where we're going, and that's where the whole conversation started.
Yeah, I think I've said this to Rod in the golf course a couple of times. Really impressed with his approach and attitude to bringing you guys into the business as equity partners. I love that Chinese proverb, it's better to have the tail of an elephant than the body of an ant. So it's really encouraging, I think, for other business owners listening out there that not to be equity precious, because getting the right business partners in at the right time and not being too greedy on the equity stake as well can add a shit ton more value to your own shareholding, which I think is being demonstrated with your business. Yeah,
totally. Over the last 10 years, it's just added to what he's been doing. And like you said, he's been operating there since the mid 1980s. So the legacy goes on, and, you know, we've got a similar plan to do that over the next decade. So.
All right, Craig, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Probably the toll that it can take on your personal and family life. Mental health too is obviously, you know, a big one these days. I suppose you got to keep your mind healthy as well. So that's definitely probably the hardest thing about growing a small business, as well as, you know, having, I've said it before, but having the right staff in the right place and maintaining that.
Favorite business book would just help you the most?
I'm actually not much of a reader, Troy. I've never have been, for various reasons, but I do like to read personal journeys of industry colleagues and find out, you know, what they went through and kind of relate to that, and sort of like, you know, relate to their stories, I suppose. Yeah.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Podcasts. I listen to yours, obviously, but you know, another one I like to listen to is a new one, which sort of started around the start of coronavirus, called Deep in the Weeds, and that's from a Sydney food critic, Anthony Huckstep, who sort of, like, I suppose, pivoted from being a food reviewer to a podcaster, and he sort of touched base with business owners in the hospitality sector. He's up to over 200 episodes now.
Great.
Obviously, talking about, you know, the coronavirus, how it's affected their business and the hospitality industry in a whole. That's a great learning tool that I've been listening to religiously. So apart from that, you know, just more sort of like sort of fun ones to listen to, I suppose, for entertainment more than anything that I would listen to. Yeah.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Confidence in yourself. I think it all starts with that. If you don't have confidence within what you're doing and what you're doing within yourself, then I think, you know, you shouldn't even be there. That's one thing I've had to learn over the years. Like, you've got to be confident in what you're doing.
Finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
If I can hang on, this is going to be a tough ride.
Love it. Yeah, very, very true. Yeah. Well, thanks for your time today, Craig. I think the audience get a lot of value out of you sharing your journey with us, and a unique situation in that the founding business partner, I guess, exiting the business. I think it's great to come back and hear about that, and congratulations on not just all the awards, but the success in the business, and, you know, having... That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.